Welcome to All About Teacher-Created DL courses. I hope that you've had a good day so far and that you're ready to learn about how to create your own distance learning courses that are tailored to your students and classes and also allow you to count student proxy hours, just like we do on the published distance learning platforms. So I'm going to switch it over here. I'm Cathy Grady, and I am Assistant Supervisor at the Hub Center. I've been here since 2018, and before I worked with the Hub Center, I've been in ABE for my entire career, which is a long one. And before I worked at the Hub Center, I worked with my friend Susan Wetenkamp-Brandt at Literacy Minnesota for many years. So and this is my dog Bear. I don't think he got enough screen time earlier, so I'm showing him again.
And hi, I'm Susan. I'm sure you know me by now. If you didn't know me before, you probably saw me this morning during the general session. I'm with Literacy Minnesota, and I'm part of the statewide technology and distance learning support team. And I don't have any furry creatures to show pictures of, unless you count a 13-year-old who badly needs a haircut.
I would count that. Okay, so the first slide is just about the resources from this session. We have our slides available in the participant materials folder for the conference. And then I have a link here to the policies, state and federal policies and procedures about distance learning. And this link is to the new website. So I caught that this morning, Susan. So it will take you right to the page that will explain all the details of all the things that we're going to talk about in terms of the policies, procedures, laws, and policy.
Yep. Yeah, if you want to download the actual policy and read it, this is where you can do that.
Okay, so our agenda is here. First, we're going to do a warm-up in just a minute, and then we're going to go into a little bit of detail about the ABE law and policy that is allowing for us to count the hours for distance learning courses that you teachers create yourselves. We're going to talk about the kinds of courses that qualify for this new group of courses that will be approved, and we'll talk a little bit about learning management systems and quality design for a course, an online course. I'll give you some examples of approved courses and show you what I like about them and what's good about them, and then we'll go through the application and course approval process. And because we will be, if you are creating a course like this, you're going to be publishing something on the internet. We'll have to talk about copyright a little bit, and then we're going to introduce you to a new professional development opportunity that covers all this stuff in more detail. So there you go. Okay, so this is our warm-up. We're going to do a Zoom poll. I'm putting my glasses on so I can see. You should have a poll up on your screen. So if you could participate in that right now, tell us what you know about LMSs and which one you're using. That would be great. This is fun. I get to see everything here. It looks like Google Classroom is a big one.
I like the what's an LMS. There's a couple of people who are the beginners. That's awesome. We're so glad you're here.
Yes, we are. We are. Wow, this is fun. So really, Schoology.
Google Classroom is coming out to be the winner, I think.
Almost everybody's voted. 56. Wow, this is really fun.
So I would just throw out there a question. Yes, somebody's already done it. If you're using an LMS and it isn't on this list, drop it in the text chat and let us know which one.
Yes.
Somebody already did mention Seesaw.
Yeah.
Which I know has been very popular in elementary ed this past year.
Okay. What do you think? I think this is pretty much everybody.
So we also have a fairly large group of people who haven't started yet but want to. So I think those people are also in exactly the right place.
Yep. Cool. Really good. Thank you.
I think we're all clicking stop at the same time.
Sorry. Okay. So that was really interesting. Google Classroom's the winner. All right, now Susan is going to talk about ABE Law and Policy a little bit.
Ooh, so exciting. I know this is everybody's favorite topic, but as I mentioned a little bit in the general session this morning, our state statute that governs how funding is distributed for adult basic education talks about our contact hour distribution methodology, right? Like that's how we distribute funding. And there is a stipulation in that statute that says we can't count hours for homework, but explicitly says we can count hours for distance learning, interactive distance learning, right? So we really need to be clear on what's the difference between homework and distance learning. So this was a kind of vigorous debate this past year with distance learning team and staff at the Department of Ed and other practitioners from around the state. And we sort of settled on two primary features that distinguish distance learning from homework. And that number one is that distance learning has both instruction and practice, and probably also assessment, right? Distance learning is a full instructional modality. So students could take a course on a distance learning product and learn something new. This is different from homework because homework is meant to be the opportunity to practice or apply something that you learned in class. So homework is practice only. Oh, Cathy, I think you advanced the slide. Can you go back,
I sure
please?
did. I didn't mean to. Sorry about that.
Everybody's doing that to me today.
I was trying to mute myself.
So yes, homework is just practice. It's not anything new. It's just going over something you already learned. And the second feature is the interactivity. So the statute specifically says interactive distance learning. So what does interactive mean? It means you interact with the software, with a teacher, with a tutor, or with other students to get feedback, to be able to change your answers or responses based on feedback, that you can engage with manipulative materials, all those kinds of things that are increasing engagement and your ability to work towards mastery of the content beyond just something static that would be like homework. So if you think of, let's say, a worksheet, right, would be homework. But if it's distance learning, there's probably a text or a video or some other kind of instructional component. Then there's the activity. The activity is interactive. You get immediate feedback. You can change your responses. And then maybe you get peer feedback or teacher feedback on your work. So it's a more robust experience. So we know that this is work that teachers are doing, and we wanted to be able to count proxy hours for it. And there's a variety of reasons why we wanted to codify this into policy and procedure. And that's, for one reason, teachers have been asking for it, and they've been asking for it for a long time, actually. It's not new to 2020, 2021. This has been a thing that people have been coming to the distance learning team asking about for 4 or 5 years, I would say, at least. But until the changes caused by the pandemic sort of skyrocketed its importance, it hadn't been something that we had focused a lot of attention on. But it also mirrors the instructional delivery systems of K-12 and higher ed, and allows us to kind of work on the same level as those systems. As Cathy mentioned in her intro, it allows for customization and being able to tailor things specifically to our content standards, our career pathways, adult diploma, those kinds of things. So it's not just off the shelf, but it's custom. It recognizes our expertise and skill as professionals, as professional teachers, that we know what our learners need best, and we know how to put that together and deliver it to them. And it really is also very helpful for hybrid classes, especially as we start transitioning back into some face-to-face instruction, where maybe the students are coming to the building a couple of days a week and they're studying online as well. Having a customized course in a learning management system to support the face-to-face instruction is probably going to be a common mode of learning going forward. Go ahead to the next slide, Cathy. So what are we talking about? What's a course, right? What's the definition? So the procedure that we developed last year allows for both a learning management system developed course or a class website, as long as the website allows you to determine which students have completed the work and that they have completed all the work. So maybe you have students logging in with a Google account and you can view what they're doing, that kind of thing. It has to have at least 12 lessons totaling 20 proxy hours. So it's not for individual one-off kinds of things. It's for a full complete course built by someone in Minnesota ABE. And it can be either materials you make yourself or materials that you're curating from published resources, or it can be a mix of those two things. And frequently it is a mix of those two. Obviously, it has to cover ABE content, right? Just like our face-to-face instruction, and should be aligned to our content standards, just like our face-to-face instruction. Go ahead.
Okay.
We're going to turn it over to Cathy to talk about what makes a good online course.
All right. Well, so yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes a good online course now. I have some opinions that I have developed since this pandemic started and my middle schoolers started learning online exclusively. You know, it was a tough time for all of us, all the teachers, especially, well, everyone, because teachers were putting all of their courses online all at once, and sometimes it was a semester's worth, whatever. But what I found was that some teachers did a really good job when I looked on Schoology, which my kids use, to try to help them, which I've since given up on completely, actually, by the way. So, but when I tried to help them at the beginning, I found that some teachers had their courses really well organized. So we could easily find what the kids were supposed to do, where the Google Meet link was for the day, what the code was. The code made sense. It wasn't some gobbledygook that was hard to type in. And there was consistency in their course. So Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about naming conventions? Because I think you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, sure. So what we're referring there to specifically is things like documents that you upload into the course. So Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoint slide decks, whatever, documents that you've created and are sharing with your students. The naming of those documents is really critical because, for one thing, it often shows in the learning management system the name of the file, right? So you want it to be human readable and make sense and feel like a logical description of what the document actually is. But also, typically, the student has to download that file. It then goes into their downloads folder, and they need to be able to find it, right? And that's why we're talking about findability. This is really a feature that is discussed in the literature about good online courses. It's an actual term, which if you're not familiar with online course development, you may have never heard before. But if something is findable, it's easy to locate, you know where to look for things, it makes sense, right? And when findability is low, students don't do well in your course.
And they get really frustrated, which was me last spring when I'm trying to help my kids on Schoology and tearing my hair out. So we're trying to model at least some of the best practices here. So you can see that the link here explains what it is. It's some research on how findability impacts online learning. And this particular piece of research talks about academics, higher ed academics, but it really applies, I think, as much or more for our ABE students. So there's a good analogy in there that talks about how you go into the Home Depot for sandpaper, and maybe you've never been in a Home Depot before, and there's stacks of shelves 20 feet high, and it's this huge big box, and you just don't know where to go, and you just need like the 50 grit, or I don't even know about grits, but the 50 grit sandpaper, and you're lost. So I like that analogy because it sort of gives you a feeling and shows how frustrated you are if you can't just ask somebody, or how frustrated you could get. So you get the idea that
the link is active on the slides that are in the participant
Mhm.
materials folder. So if you're interested in reading that, we won't go into further depth here, but that's something for further research at a later time.
Yep. The other thing I just wanted to note is that, you know, I will be the first to admit I'm not the most logical person. I'm kind of an abstract, random type. So for me, something that might seem findable may not be so, or maybe not logical for someone else. So I recommend that you either have a couple of higher level students test it out, or your colleagues before you put it into action, so that you can make sure it's findable and logical and makes sense.
Mhm.
All right, so next slide, which I'm having a second. Okay, there we go. All right, so another part of findability, well, I guess going along with findability is accessibility. And that accessibility really is about two things. Actually, you know what am I doing here? I think, there we go. I advanced too far. So you want to make sure that your course is accessible on a variety of different devices. We know that most of our students have smartphones, but many of them do not have laptops. So you want to make sure your course works on all kinds of devices: a tablet, a smartphone, a laptop, a regular computer. And I already talked about Zoom and Google Meet codes being available and being in one place with simple codes. Also, I've been thinking about this more for our program because we have so many online course offerings. I want to make sure that because our students tend to go through more than one course, and if we have more than one course offering online, that's a hybrid course. I really think we're going to have to start thinking about protocols that all of our teachers will follow. And I know St. Paul Public Schools did that when they were working to get all the K-12 courses onto Schoology. And they came up with some things that I thought were really good, and some things that were kind of jargony. So anyway, so I have so many opinions about how these things can work, but I don't want to bore you with my rant. But anyway, if so think about how your program can have protocols that move from one course to another, so students really get a feel for how online courses work in your program, and then they can more easily even navigate the next one that they go to. So then another part of accessibility is making sure that your course is accessible for students with disabilities. So some of the things that I'm no expert on this, but some of the things that are that most of the checklists talk about are, font size and using a sans serif font for screen readers. Also descriptions of visuals. So if you have a picture or whatever, make sure that you add a description of what that picture is for a screen reader. Closed captioning for hearing impaired. Those are just some of the many things to think about. And there are a lot of tools out there. Here are a few, and these are hot links too. So you can, if you want to go back and look at any of these, you can do that. And then some of the LMSs have I bet you most, or if not all, have an accessibility checker built in. So right here, you can see that I highlighted the little accessibility checker. So this is in Moodle, and so as you're building a course, you can just click on that, and it will help you with making sure your course is accessible for all kinds of learners. Okay, so another thing that, a couple other things that you do as teachers just automatically in your in-person courses, but that you might need to remember to do in your distance learning course is, well, a few things, but I'm going to start with relationships. Don't ask me why I have this picture in here. It was for patterns and knowing where to go and stuff, but I just think it's pretty, so I left it in here. Also, this is from a website called Unsplash that is copyright-free pictures, which is really helpful when you're putting together things like this, and also for your distance learning courses. So anyway, your instructor should be present in the course, you as the instructor. And that means that you might want to put a picture and some personal information about yourself at the beginning of your course. You should encourage students to do that so they can get to know each other. Relationships are still a huge part of learning, whether you're doing it online or in person. So it's super important that the teacher shows that they're engaged, that they care about their students, that their students' progress is important to them, and that they're going to provide feedback. You might want to have office hours that you let students know about at the beginning of your course, and announcements and things, and let students know when they can contact you, because if you don't, you might get calls at 11 at night, or you might get a text or email, which is fine. You know, you can always, but it's nice to put parameters on that so they know when you're going to respond. And then other supports and touch points. Not every program has the luxury of having a lot of different staff, but at Hub Center, we're able to have an orientation teacher who shows the students how to use Google Meet when they first sign up for the course, and how to get into their distance learning programs and things. And so that's the first touch point. And then the students have the teacher, and then the students have each other. And so the more ways that students are connected to our program, the more they're gonna persist and feel like they belong. So, and then these are things that, again, that you do automatically and kind of in your sleep when you are teaching in person, and things to remember in your distance learning courses to build in predictable routines and patterns. I'll show you an example of that. Some examples of that in the courses that I'll show you later, the online distance learning courses that were approved already. Lesson planning. So you're going to have lessons within the units, and those lessons should really, like Susan talked about earlier, what makes it education instead of homework, and what makes it instruction is having, these components of the lesson plan. And then multimodal learning is important to appeal to different learning styles. We know that good brain based teaching includes a lot of different ways to present the material, so students can absorb it and take it in different ways. It helps them remember and retain. So here's another link. This is, I think, for newer teachers or newer staff. I wanted to put this in here because I think links is a really terrific bunch of resources that just talk about all the ways you can be excellent in adult education. Okay, I think we're back to Susan,
We're back
right?
to Susan, woohoo. So a question that we often get at the Distance Learning Help Desk is, what LMS should I use? And I get that question in sessions as well. And there is no one product that is better than all the others. There are products that are better or worse depending on your context, what you're trying to do, what other tools you're using, what do you have access to. So, and also they're constantly evolving and changing. So for example, as we heard from Astrid this morning, we have to leave behind our Schoology educator groups and migrate them to a new network because Schoology is no longer offering free teacher accounts, right? If you already had a free teacher account, you can continue to use it, but you can't sign up for a new one. So change is the only constant, right? Things are continually evolving, especially rapidly in the software field. So if you're thinking about, I need to find an LMS, one thing to consider is, do you have a teaching partner, somebody else at your program who's already doing some of this work? What are they using? Because it's really nice if you've got somebody you can talk with who's a little bit more experienced than you are. And just talk through, here's what I want to do with my course. Do you think this product is a good fit? It's a good place to start. Think about also, how does the LMS integrate with other technology you're using. So for example, if your program is full on into Google Suite and you're using Google Meet for your live trainings and you have Google Calendar and Gmail, probably Google Classroom is going to be a really good fit for you because it integrates so seamlessly with all those other applications, right? But if you're not on those systems, what if you're all on Microsoft, right? For example, I think Minneapolis Adult Education is using Microsoft applications instead of Google. Well, then that doesn't fit, right? And they, I think, use Schoology as their platform of choice in Minneapolis Adult Ed. So it partly depends on thinking about all the other platforms and tools you have and what fits well. Also, do you have a budget? Can you buy something, or are you restricted to just using what's free? And so there are so many options. If you come to look into the PD course that Cathy and I are putting together, we have links to a whole bunch of different options and links to resources, how to learn how to use those options. So that's a place where you can learn more. Go ahead, Cathy, to the next slide.
Okay, so this is a Jamboard. This is the first time I've ever used Jamboard. And
he's going outside her comfort zone. Woo!
I am. So we're hoping that you will participate on the Jamboard, which requires you to go into the chat now. And if your first name starts with A to M, use the first link, the Jamboard one. And if your first name starts with N to Z, use the second one. So the first link is shared in the chat, and so is the second link. And thanks, Emily. I can do it. I know I can. So Cindy, our tech helper extraordinaire, is going to monitor what you all do in the Jamboard. And if you've never used a Jamboard before, don't worry, just try out some things. And if you hover over the different controls, it'll tell you what they do. So I'm anxious to see what you all answer to these questions.
So I would think probably what folks are going to want to do is use the text box feature on the Jamboard to add their text, unless you've got one of those swanky tablets with a pen and you can write by hand. If you're like me and you're writing on your touchpad on your laptop, it's going to be pretty tricky.
You can also use sticky notes. I think those just
come sticky notes are fun too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, there's always somebody that ends up like writing all over the Jamboard in our classes. It's
Mike says it's full.
What?
Try the other link.
Yep.
There's two. So try the other one if one is full.
Also,
and there's also multiple pages. So if you filled up page one, you can go to the second page and add more there.
Also, if you're putting on sticky notes, they all land in the upper left corner, so you have to move them.
Drag them.
Yes, you have to drag them to where you want them to go.
So we're getting lots of yeses. We've attended online courses, and I like the flexibility of doing work on my own time. Flexibility is coming up a lot. Let me flip over to the other board here. Yep, we've got a lot of people who've taken courses online. Moodle, Blackboard, flexibility, Canvas. Learning when it's convenient. A lot of convenience talk here too. Oh, a bit impersonal at times.
Impersonal, yes.
That's where that teacher presence in the course really comes into play, right?
Right.
Oh, busy work to prove that you were there and it didn't contribute to learning.
Whoa, bad homework. Yes.
Yeah, I've heard the term busy work a lot from my kids.
It's a real problem across many types of education, not just K-12, but also higher ed and other contexts.
Oh yeah, ability to go back and review the material.
Well, that's a good one.
Yes, that's good.
Oh, I like Abby's text chat saying the discussions can feel like busy work if you're required to post twice, but the content doesn't matter. Yeah, I agree.
So true, Abby.
I've taken courses like that. I'm like, I don't have anything more to say, but I have to go say something because I'm required to.
Yeah. Also, when I was in grad school and I took online courses, they would make us cite our resources like in AP style in the discussion. That's not how you do it in real
That's
life.
not a discussion.
No, that's just, I don't know, starting your research paper. Maybe they meant to do that, but I don't know.
Less
Yeah,
distraction too in the online.
Less
when you're in-
distraction.
Yeah.
You know, unlike Cathy's kids who have been struggling in distance learning, I have a 13-year-old who's been thriving in it. And one of the reasons why is that he is a very sociable kid who very easily gets distracted by all his classmates and talking to them endlessly when he's in the classroom. But when he's alone in his room with just his computer, he doesn't get distracted and he gets his work done. So yeah, it can be a real improvement.
Yes, it makes me happy that your kid is doing well in distance learning, even though it makes
Many
me
kids
sad
are
my
not, but
children
some
not.
are. All right, well, I think that was a great discussion. Should we move on?
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so now I am going to show you some courses that have been approved for proxy hours for distance learning that have been created by teachers. These all happen to be career pathways classes, but they show you a variety of different LMSs as well as different ways to set up your course. So I'm going to just launch in and click on this link and show you Certified Nursing Assistant course. Now this is on Moodle. And the thing I like about this, or a number of things I like about this, first of all, the reason that this is on Moodle and presented in this way as an asynchronous self-paced course is because this is a very, very popular course and students are always wanting to get in, and sometimes there just isn't a live or a synchronous class available. So for them to take at a time that's convenient. Actually, Cathy Bjornson, and do you remember who else did this? Someone else. I know Cathy because I work with her. Put this together, and let's see here. One thing I like is that you can scroll all the way down. You can see every single unit. You can see how long each unit takes. You can see me scrolling, right? You can see when you're going to be done. It is quite long, so I suppose it could be overwhelming, but you can see all of the lessons within each unit. And then at the end, there is the test prep. And you can take the test. So, so it's easily navigable. There's no question what you have to do first, second, and third. And another thing too is that you can see what you've done with these checkboxes. So I already did where a CNA works. A lot of times into these in these different links, there are videos, there's PowerPoints. So that's an example of multimodal. There's vocabulary pretest. So that's, testing prior knowledge. And then at the end, you would take a post test. So what else did I want to show you here? Pretest, post test. Oh, the other thing is that there are ways to restrict things. So you can't just zoom through the quizzes and call it done. Students actually have to take the lessons as well. So, and in Moodle, I don't think it's the cleanest design, to be honest with you, but it's very functional. And you can see here, there's like the little cookie crumb path to, there's my home, here's where I am now in the Certified Nursing Assistant course. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Or the next course. Okay, so this one is ServSafe. This one was approved recently, well, in summer. And this is built on PowerSchool Haiku. And don't ask me what the difference is between those two things. I don't know. But I think the district has access to PowerSchool, and that's how we are using it. Maybe there's something in the chat. Maybe somebody knows. Anyway, this course is going on now, and it is a hybrid course. So Stacy Bennig developed this course along with Liz Andrus, and Stacy has been teaching it with synchronous classes through Google Meet, and then with these asynchronous lessons. And I like the navigation of this with all the chapters here on the side all the time. You know where you are. So right now I'm in chapter 3, but I can see where I've been and where I'm going next. Another thing about this course that I think is really good is it's got really nice interactivity. So she's built in Quizlets, and you just click there, and this is really fun. So you're looking at all the different vocabulary for that particular chapter. And so I'm going to click on it, and then now I know what vigorously means. And then I'm going to go to the next one, single use, designed to be thrown away. You get the idea. And then if you want, I think this is really fun. You can play a matching game, and it's timed, so there's a little pressure there. So some students might not like that, but you don't have to play it if you don't like it. So you can see not only is this good for, it's hard for me to talk and do this at the same time. Let's see. Oh, I know what a finger caught is now because I've been looking at this course. Anyway, so you get the idea, but not only is it good for learning the material, but it's also good for digital literacy skills like drag and drop and clicking on things and stuff like that. So I like that about it. Let me go back to PowerSchool. Okay, then another thing is that she's really good about putting in routines and patterns in her course. So you always have vocabulary. You almost always have a PowerPoint. You almost always have worksheets, practice games, and then there's videos. So they're all built in here. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything different. It's just all right here. And then there's other activities that they use in class, like Stump the Jump. If you remember Car Talk, I think that's from Car Talk. And other things that when they're in class, they can also work on these. So it's useful for what they're doing in class and what they're doing asynchronously in their distance learning, the distance learning portion of the class. Okay, and now I'm going to show you Introduction to Small Business. So this is something that Chris' class put together. Pretty much she had to do it on the fly because we closed down in March, and we were we had already started this Introduction to Small Business course that was paid for with a grant, and numbers were being counted. And I mean, we wanted to serve our students anyway, but this really had to be, it was kind of a lot of pressure to get this online quickly. And so this is Google Classroom, and you can see that it's nice and clean. I like the way that it looks. And you start with a stream, and then you've got this upcoming work due soon. Obviously nothing due soon because this is from May, June 2020. You have a stream of sort of like a Facebook kind of a deal, but she's got announcements that start from like most recent and go to farther back. And then the classwork. We have all the units here, and I think that Chris did a very good job, first of all, of organizing. So you've got all the stuff you need right here at the top, at the beginning. And then Chris also did a very good job in this course of being present in the course. So there are videos of Chris showing how to install Zoom. That's when we were using Zoom at the beginning, before it was a security issue, before all the security issues started and we had to move to Google Meet. But there's videos. She recorded some of her classes. She has very clear instructions. So rubrics even for the distance learning work they did. So here's another thing that I think is interesting about and cool about this course is that Chris used both Google Classroom to organize lessons that are built into Google Classroom, but then also she added lessons and units from distance learning platforms that were approved and that are published, like Wetenkamp, and what else did she use? Wetenkamp and another one that I can't think of right now, but and then she has a link right here, log in, with a rubric of what you're supposed to do. In addition to complete the marketing basics course in Edmentum, you just click there, and then her rubric talks about what makes a learner successful in this lesson, this assignment. So it's a lot about, because this was so early on in moving everyone online, it's a lot about just, being able to log in, being able to navigate the distance learning platform, that kind of thing. The other thing I'll show you briefly is just that Google Classroom, as many of you know, makes it easy to grade students' homework and see what they've done and when they're doing it. So it can email you when a student has done an assignment, and then you can just click through your email, or you can go to the course and you can see all the students. You can see that particular student's work and provide feedback right there on the spot. So I like that about Google Classroom. And I think if there's another point I wanted to say about this course, but I think all of these courses are good examples of being consistent in the way that they're designed, in having their material findable, and then especially in the introduction to small business, I think that the presence in the course is a real asset. So, and I think I said this, but there's a ton of interactive activities and resources, so that multimodal piece is addressed.
Thanks, Cathy.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We were having a very robust chat over in the chat window. So which I'm pretty sure you did not have open while you were presenting. So if you want to go back and review that, there's some good stuff going on over there. So you've been working the past 6 months over the school year, teaching your students online, building out your content. How do you know if your course is ready to go online and or ready to get approved for distance learning proxy hours? So kind of a rule of thumb that I give people for deciding whether or not they have a course that sort of meets the course definition is to think about whether or not you have or could make a syllabus for your course that would outline the goals and objectives, what are the units, and what learning will happen in each of those units. How will you know when you've gotten to the end, right, of your course? If you have a syllabus like that and can write or could write a syllabus like that, you probably have a course that meets the course definition. It would be organized and aligned to standards so that we know what it is that we are trying to move students towards mastery of. It should have a good, robust mix of materials and activities for both instruction and practice, and presumably also assessment. It's not specified in statute anything about assessment, but we know that assessment, knowing whether or not the students have actually mastered the material, is an important component of all instruction. If we don't know if students have learned the content, then we don't know what we need to continue to address as teachers. So instruction, practice, and assessment are all critical components of a good course. But you are ready to submit a course for approval if you have that concept in mind. You have a content domain that you're teaching, and you have all the materials organized and aligned and put into units, and you know what students are going to get out of those units. Want to go to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we're not going to take a look at the applications live in this session because they're relatively long and involved, but both of the applications, and there are 2 different ones, and I'll explain in a minute what the difference between them is, are multiple pages so that it's not just this giant thing that scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, right? It's broken up into pages, which is really nice when you're filling out the form, but makes it hard to preview the form to see what all is in there. So what we did was we took all the questions and we put them into one Google Doc and listed everything on one page. So you can review that Google Doc to see ahead and what is all going to be on the application. And those are linked here. They're also on our new distance learning website, but if you are using the slides for this session, you can click on those. We don't need to do it now, but that's where you can see all the stuff that's in all of the applications before you start trying to fill one out. And two forms, why two forms? Time on task, unit completion. So time on task is going to be for any learning management system that has the ability to pull a report and tell you how much time students have been spending in the course on the learning materials. Most learning management systems don't do that, but a few of them do. So I know for example, the Talent LMS, the licensed version of Canvas, and the licensed version of D2L Brightspace all have that capability. Most of the free products, including the free version of Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom, Moodle, don't have that capability. So while they may be tracking when students are working, there's no report you can pull that tells you how much time that was. So for those courses that are built on those platforms, instead you do unit completion, where you observe the students, you kind of get a sense of how long it takes on average for people to go through the materials. You use your best insight and experience from having taught the content before in an in-person class, and how long does it take typically for students to work through that. And you give us a recommendation when we review your application. We'll compare it to other courses that are similar. We'll compare it to approved distance learning platforms, and we'll come up with a solid recommendation for how many proxy hours should be awarded for a completed unit. So the two applications are slightly different because one will ask you for what report do you pull for time on task, and the other one will ask you how did you figure out how many proxy hours to award per unit. So that's why there's two forms, but otherwise they're 90% the same. All right, go ahead.
Oops, did I just do, there we go.
Yes, you went twice for some reason. I don't know how, but you did. So things that are in the application, the first part is just about you and the LMS that you're using, including all the stuff about proxy hours. So who are you? Where are you teaching? What LMS are you using? How do you figure out the proxy hours? The second part is sort of the course overview and some details about what standards is it aligned to. Basically, what is the course? Give us a course description. What is it about? Is it GED math prep? Is it a CNA prep? Is it ESL 1? What are we talking about here? And what standards are you teaching? And then there's a section for, well, what's in the course? What are the teaching and learning materials and activities? And it's quite long, but it's actually pretty quick because it's all these check boxes. So you just say, check, I have videos, I have slideshows, I have interactive activities, I have this, and you check the things. And then you say whether or not they are things that you made yourself, or if they are things that are published resources. And if it's a published resource, you say where you got it from. And you don't need to be specific. It's not like you have to send us to a direct link. If you're pulling materials from Khan Academy, you just say Khan Academy, and that's it. You don't need to write anything more than that. Just tell us like who's the content provider. So that section, while it's long, is pretty quick to fill out. And then the last piece is a little certification that the course meets guidelines, in which you say, yes, I made this course. Yes, it covers ABE content. And yes, it's aligned to standards. Yes, I have respected copyright in this course. And then, yes, it's going to be able to use time on task, or no, it doesn't use time on task, it uses unit completion instead. And you sign those things, and then you submit the application. It comes to us on the DL team, and depending on how thoroughly it's been completed, we may or may not need to get back to you with further questions, depending on how much detail is in there. Go ahead to the next one. So kind of questions about how do you submit a strong application? You want to get to the checkered flag at the end of the race, right? You don't want to go back and forth with Cathy with 20 emails. Like, I don't get it. What's happening here? You just want to get it in and get it approved, right? So specificity and detail, particularly when it comes to the standards alignment and the proxy error reporting stuff. That's like the things that hang us up the most, I would say. Particularly the proxy error things if it's unit completion. Like, how did you arrive at those numbers? That's one of the stickiest points. Good evidence of instructional content, good variety of materials and activities. And this last one is really, really helpful for us, which is let us see your course. Whether that is you send us a student account that you've set up and let us log in with it, or you make a little tour of your course on using a screencast and you kind of talk us through what it looks like. Worst case, maybe you send us some screenshots that kind of explain what's on it, but then you're going to spend a lot of time writing, probably quicker to just make a screencast. Or send us a link, right, with an account that we can log in with. That will let us kind of get the idea of what's in your course much faster than you writing a bunch of stuff up. So we strongly recommend that. And Melanie, I saw a question in the text chat saying something about sans serif font and accessibility. Yes, for recommendation for accessibility, especially for learners with dyslexia, is to use a sans serif font. Good question. Red flags on your application. What's going to make us go, I don't know about this. Don't tell us what standards you're addressing. We can't figure out how you determined what the proxy hours should be. Your unit completion rewards are really big, like 25 hours per unit or something crazy. Like, we actually got one in that we went, you're asking for how many hours? Cathy was sort of stunned. Thought that can't be right. So that one kind of, and actually ultimately we did approve that course, but it took a lot of back and forthing before it got done because it was like a huge number. If we have any potential concerns about copyright violations, that's going to be a no. And then, you know, we want a rich, robust learning experience for our students. So if we see that you only have a couple of resource types, and especially if we look at those resource types and it's like lots of practice but no instruction, that's going to be a red flag. And basically, yeah, if you don't fill it out very well, if you don't give us much information, you're really vague, that's going to be a no. And it usually isn't going to be a no forever, but it's going to be you need to give us more information before we can approve this. So oftentimes we ultimately end up approving things, but it's this back and forth negotiation, getting more information and sort of thing. So the more you put in to begin with, the less back and forth there is, the faster it will get to approval. All right, Cathy, go ahead. So then one last question we often get is, okay, what if I change my course after it's approved? Because we know that courses are never done, right? We're constantly tweaking and fixing and adding and changing things out. So sort of a general rule of thumb would be if you've changed 25% or less of the course, you don't need to reapply. If it's more than that, then you should resubmit for approval a second time, but note that this course has already been approved, but I'm resubmitting because I made significant changes, and here's what the changes are. Yeah, question?
I'm sorry. We do have a question, and that is from Anna Mundy. If we do have a hybrid course, can most of our instruction be in person and the practice activities are posted in the LMS? So that brings us back to the homework versus course topic.
Yeah. You should still have some instructional materials in the LMS, even if they're just for reference. So if the student gets stuck on the practice activities, they have something to refer back to, and they can go find that. It doesn't have to be as much, I think, if you're using it in a hybrid way. And So you might make a note of that when you apply with the course, saying this course is used in combination with a live class. We're doing most of the instruction in that format, because obviously those two things are going to work together. But we do want students to not just get stuck in the online and not be able to progress because they don't have the resources at hand that they need. Does that answer your question? If not, let us know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next one? What do you think?
Yep, I think so. Keep the questions coming.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to get your course approved? Really depends. If we get 150 of these things next week, it's going to take us a while to get through them all. Right? If we get 5, no, we'll get them done pretty quick, right? So volume is a huge question, and we don't really know what we're going to get next week. In addition to that, the more thorough and complete you are, the faster it's going to get approved, especially if you have that screencast or student account that we can log in with. That makes everything so much easier. There was something else. Oh yeah, if you throw us some really oddball curveball thing, then
like the one with hundreds of hours that we
like
did.
The one with hundreds of hours, then it's going to take some more time. I will say also that time on task platforms tend to go through a lot faster than unit completion ones, because one of the stickiest points is trying to figure out how many hours to award for things. So those do tend to take a little bit more time, whereas time on task tend to get approved a little bit more quickly. And that's, I think, all I have to say about that. And there's a really cool conversation going on in the text chat about sans serif fonts, which is awesome. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time, timekeepers?
We have 20 minutes almost. Still.
Well, that's great. We are ahead of schedule, which means we have time to talk about copyright and fair use. So why are we talking about that? Because it is really, really easy to violate copyright in building an online course. And there are a lot of copyright violations all over the internet all the time, because it's kind of like speeding. It's really easy to do, and therefore it happens a lot. But that doesn't mean it's okay. And so we need to watch out for it. And it's really hard to comply with the rules if you don't know what the rules are. So we want to make sure that everybody has at least some working understanding of what the rules are before they start building their course. So copyright is, of course, a US law. There are also international laws. Many countries have copyright laws, but we're talking about US law here, that protects the right of the creator of any original work to decide who gets to use their work, when they get to use it, and for what purposes they get to use it. That includes all original works, texts, videos, photos, paintings, any creative thing. So every single time that you pull out your cell phone and you take a picture, you have created an original work. And that original work is copyrighted to you automatically. You do not need to apply for it or anything else. It's yours immediately because you made a thing. Now, you have the right to decide who gets to use your picture. If you put it up on the internet and other people take it and use it without your permission, that's a violation of your rights. Educators and others like journalists who work in the public interest have the legal authority to sometimes use things in limited capacities without asking permission. And there's guidelines that say when you can do that and when you can't do that. And those guidelines are the fair use doctrine. And it's basically a defense. So a person could come to you and say, hey, you used my stuff and you didn't ask permission. That's not okay. You owe me money. And you can say, well, yes, I did use your stuff, but my use is fair and this is why, right? And so you could contest it. It would be then, if you wanted to contest it, it would go to a court, and a judge would make a determination as to whether or not your use actually is fair. And that's a civil court, it's not criminal, so nobody's going to jail here. It's a question of fees and fines, not jail time. All right, go ahead, Cathy. So there's four factors that a judge would look at in a court case that would decide whether or not your use is actually fair or not. The first one is, we already talked about, is it in the public interest? The nature and the purpose of the use. So education is specifically called out. Nonprofit work, journalism, anything else that's a public good, right? So that, includes us. So we have some protection here. Also, transformational new creative works are very heavily protected. So for example, photos, like I said, are protected, but if an artist were to take hundreds of photos off the internet and turn them into a mosaic that makes a portrait of, I don't know, Martin Luther King Jr., and they make a new creative work that is a mosaic portrait of all these photos that they found on the internet, they could do that because that's a new creative work. That's transformational. That's fair use. The nature of the copyrighted work is also really important. So the stronger protections go to more creative works. So a novel is more heavily protected than a news article. There are things that are not protected at all, like some work policies and, the phone book, things like that, that are just data. There's nothing original or creative about them. So the more creative the work, the stronger the protection. How much of it you use is a big thing. And this often applies in our context in teaching. If you have a smaller excerpt, it's more likely to be fair. So if you take 1 or 2 pages out of a book, that's much more likely to be fair than if you copy whole units, right? The smaller the part, the more likely it is to be fair. And the effect of all of this is how much does it impact the copyright holder's ability to earn money off their intellectual property. So for example, in the North Star world recently, we found out that some user in some other state had been going through the modules, the assessment modules, and doing screencast videos of himself doing the modules and explaining to people exactly what every question was and how to answer it and posting them on YouTube. Mm-hmm. That is a copyright violation as well as really bad educational practice. Don't do that because it's going to impact our ability to sell our product. North Star's not very valuable if everybody has all the answers to everything. Go ahead, Cathy. So if we're thinking about educational fair use kind of protects us for one-time use in the classroom, closed environment, that kind of translates to an online course that's behind a password protected login, right? This actually hasn't been tested in court yet, so we can only say probably this is fair use because a judge has never made a ruling on it. But copyright lawyers tell me that they would feel very confident that they would win that case. They'd be happy to take it. They're sure that it would be deemed fair use. It's just never actually been tested. And my suspicion is the reason it hasn't been tested is because the people who would bring the case also think it's probably fair use and it's not worth pursuing. So if you're posting things, small excerpts, it's in your course only for your students, they have to log in, and it's not public on the web, you're probably fine. If you're using a website that's open, doesn't have logins, then you need to be a little bit more careful about what you publish.
And I'll just say that when we review your course, we would bring up maybe a red flag or two, but we're not the courts in this situation. So, you know, the risk is yours in terms of being sued, and hopefully no one will get sued.
Yeah, it's usually not a suit. It's usually a takedown notice, like, hey, stop using our stuff. And then also, here's how much we charge. We see you've been using it for 6 months. This is what it would cost. You need to pay us. So it's going to cost you some money, unless the use is extremely egregious. You're probably not going to court, because the lawyer costs would outweigh for them too what they would get out of it. So it's not worth anybody's time.
Yeah.
And there's a question from Mike about all videos on YouTube are not protected. It depends on how the person put the thing on YouTube, but generally speaking, when you publish something on YouTube, the whole point of it is to be able to make it shareable. So the terms of use, yeah, probably are allowed to be shared if you can find it on public YouTube. If you didn't want it to be shared, you would have made it private, so only people who have the link can see it. If you put it on the public YouTube, it's available to everybody to share. But you shouldn't download the video and then re-upload it into your course. What you should do instead is link to it on YouTube, or get the embed code and embed it in your website, because in both of those cases, it links out back to the original. You're not saying this is my video. You're saying, here's somebody's video. If you want more, go here, right? All right, so there's a question from Jason. I'm going to read it out loud. So let's say a teacher has a paid login to Reading A to Z, or teachers created material or similar. Then let's say a teacher uses multiple documents for their own students in their own classes. That's not copyright infringement, correct? Most likely not. It's going to be dependent upon the end user license agreement when you bought those things. But usually when you buy something, it's going to say you have the right to reproduce it for classroom use. That's typical if you buy a workbook or something like that, or a teacher guide. In other cases, that's not true. They say, no, every student has to buy their own workbook, in which case you can't copy and pass it out. So it really depends on the license of and how they've published it, what they said you can do with it.
And another key difference is that if you're using it in class, you're not publishing it. So it's not like you're republishing, right, Susan?
Say that again, Cathy.
If you're using these documents that are copyrighted in your class, like in your in-person class or your synchronous class, you're not publishing it. So
you're not publishing it, but you are copying it, right? And copyrights protect, can you copy it? But again, fair use says you're allowed to copy things for one-time use in your classroom. That's okay. It's approved, right? It's an approved in the public good use. Republishing on your website is not an approved public good use. So good news is that there's lots of stuff that you can use that's openly licensed, right? And when you use openly licensed materials, the whole point of that is that they want to make it shareable. They want people to use it. And so you have free permission to take that stuff and put it in your course, because that's the whole point of it. So we strongly recommend that people use openly licensed materials. And if anybody is looking for links to lots of places to find openly published stuff in the new course that Cathy and I are going to be telling you about in a little bit, I have a whole Google Doc with many different links in there to all kinds of different publishers who have free and openly licensed content. And we also have a link to a crowded learning website that has other content providers, some of which I had and some of which I didn't. And so there's a wealth of great stuff out there that is totally free to use, and it has no copyright protection on it. And I would strongly recommend you start there.
Okay, well, Susan just mentioned this. Today we are opening up the new course on developing a course for adult learners using an LMS. Not adult. Yeah, your course would use an LMS. I think we might need to change the title. But anyway, nothing's ever done. But this is the course. It's on Moodle. Here's the link. And it will be
Cathy, I think I
live.
still have to actually flip the switch to turn it on. I think I'm going to do that like right now,
Ooh,
so that
exciting.
everybody can get in.
Okay, so this is for you if you want to build a DL course and count the student proxy hours, and you want to get your course approved. And then just for basic understanding of what makes a good course, some of the things that I talked about already are covered in more depth in the course. And then there's a unit that at the end, I think it's unit 6 or module 6, that talks about sharing your course using various LMSs. That isn't quite ready yet.
Will be very soon, though.
Soon. And so yeah, check it out. It's 4 CEUs currently in our evaluation, or for this pilot period until we're like done, or mostly done, before the next tweak or the next iteration of it. We do ask, how long did it take you? Do you think 4 CEUs makes sense? And if not, tell us what makes more sense. So,
and if we do find that everybody's taking on average somewhat longer than 4 hours to get through the material, then we will adjust that amount and we'll send new CEUs to make up for those who only got 4.
Yep.
Yep. But there's lots of good content in there. It's still a little bit under development. Like Cathy said, unit 6, we've got a whole bunch of research and links and information about how to share courses, but we don't have it quite built out in Moodle yet. So give us a couple more weeks to get that done. But there's a ton of great information in there, and we encourage you to go take a look at it.
And now you've been asking questions throughout, but there's a little bit of time left. Well, 3 minutes left for questions.
We're right in on time, Cathy.
Wow, nice job. Nice job, Susan.
Virtual high five.
Virtual high five. Thanks, Abby. Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Jason. All right. Yep. Well, we are, you can reach us, you know how to find us, I'm sure. And you can also find us through the online course. So looking forward to your feedback on that. And thanks so much for being here today.